Hi everyone, it's Katie from Moonflower Moments. Welcome and welcome back. I had to bring out one of my old reading cloths for today because I am rejuvenating one of my series here on the channel titled Reading Table Reset. So within this series, I usually spend about an hour to probably about 2 hours outside, and I look for the flowers and the plants that are usually in bloom or that are calling to me, that I feel like they have something to share with me. And then I match those plants with decks that are in my collection to really try to see what the deck and the plant together can teach me. And so today I'm going to show you 5 different pairs that I made. I'm so excited to work with these pairs. I don't know if it's all going to be this week or this month, but it gives me food for thought because essentially when I pair a deck with a plant, every time I see that plant, I then want to work with that deck. And so it helps me to build a deeper relationship within my garden space and within my home. So I'm going to go ahead and get started showing the decks. I also have some footage and some photos from my garden that I took this morning, so that way you can see the plants in their natural environment. And I'm going to start with the one that I felt the most strongly about. So that's going to be my Lantana. So Lantanas, I'll go ahead and put some footage on the screen right now. The Lantanas are these beautiful, bright flowers that tend to cluster. And so they're not native to Louisiana, but I oftentimes enjoy planting them in the garden because they're excellent pollinator plants. And so I find that every day when I come home, there's usually a butterfly of some sort that's feeding on it. My husband took footage of a giant swallowtail, the largest butterfly in North America, and it was feeding on it yesterday. And so I have this essentially right outside of my kitchen window, so when I look outside I see all of the pollinators that are on it. So it's not native to this area. However, the plant oftentimes attracts so many different species. So therefore, for that plant, I had to, of course, pick my Animal and Botanical Tarot. So here we go. Look how beautiful this deck is. I love the colors. So this deck features plants and animals that are coexisting together. Most of these are not native to Louisiana. Most of them are not even native to North America. So I like that this deck pictures such a wide variety because it reminds me that even though I have like an emphasis of native plant gardening in my area, that I really focus on that and that's my specialty, that I can learn from other animals and plants as well. So it reminds me to open my heart to perhaps like the giraffe, right? Like this is not an animal that's anywhere near this continent, but it's something that I can still learn from, similar to the Lantana. So it reminds me to be open-minded and to welcome all creatures and all plants into the garden, regardless if they're here, provided that they have a purpose and they're not doing any active damage. So especially with Lantanas, they do produce seed pods that the birds carry. So the other day I was walking in the park that's behind my house. And you know what? Now that I say that, I really should probably go walk back there today. And there was a giant lantana bush that was just like blooming at the base of a tree, and it just like blew my mind. I was like, how did this get here? Because the park is not upkept like that. It's definitely a more like dingy kind of park, but still very beautiful in its own right. And it was massive. And so I try to control the lantana by just like picking off its seeds, just so that way it doesn't spread. But I think in a controlled environment, it can be very beautiful and it can be very useful to the creatures that are enjoying it. So Lantana, this was my instant match immediately when I sat down and I decided I was going to film this video. This one jumped out at me, so I think this is the one that I need to play with first this week. All right, next is going to be a plant that I featured actually last month on my channel because I studied it in depth. But I want to bring it up here again because I think I have a new look for it. So this is the Crepe Myrtle. So I know it's very difficult for you to see. I asked my husband to clip off a cutting of it from our Crepe Myrtle in the front. He just clipped like the longest stem ever. Like it just keeps going. But that's fine. I'll go ahead and press this in my flower press so that way I can preserve it. So the Crepe Myrtle is not native to this area whatsoever, but it is very beautiful and it's very lush, and oftentimes these tiny little flowers will just fall to the ground, and so we call it Cajun snow. And so this is something that is very prolific here in the South. I hear that it's prolific in other areas as well because it is just such a beautiful ornamental plant. So let's go ahead and place that over there to the side. Last month when I did my Crepe Myrtle study, I actually paired the Crepe Myrtle with my Botticelli deck. And I'll show you and I'll explain why. So I really like the way that the Botticelli has just this beautiful sort of embellishment to it. So it is a gold fold deck. You probably just heard my accent come out there. Gold foiled deck. There we go. I definitely sounded like I was a hick for a second there. But I like how the gold reminds me of the beautiful sheen of these flowers. There's something about this deck that is so absurdly decorative that it reminds me of the Crepe Myrtle. It also features artwork from a different continent, which I think is appropriate for the Crepe Myrtle, being that it is not from the United States whatsoever, or really even from North America whatsoever. So this is the deck I used with it for my deck studies, and it totally worked, and they totally, I felt like they were communicating with each other. I felt like I got a lot out of that deck that I couldn't have got from another deck. But this morning when I was looking at the Crepe Myrtle, I picked out another deck to pair with it. Now this is a pair that I haven't done yet, but I think I might today. So I recently got Little Bird's Tarot, or Little Bird Tarot, by Shanna D here on YouTube, so I'll leave her link down below. And I really feel like this deck is just meant for my Natchez Crepe Myrtle. So that's the white Crepe Myrtle that I have. So oftentimes when I'm sitting outside, one of the most enjoyable moments in the morning is when I'm drinking my coffee. I see the mockingbirds that climb into the Crepe Myrtle. And it's such a special occasion for me because mockingbirds are so common, right? Like they are not an uncommon species whatsoever. However, I never really paid that much attention to them until I moved in with my husband, who is a huge bird fanatic. And so I remember one day walking probably at like 3 o'clock in the morning, I think it was a summer night, and hearing a mockingbird and really listening to it for the first time in my life, and coming inside and saying, oh my goodness, you know, there's a mockingbird out there. I've never heard one before. And my husband being like, what do you mean? You've never heard one before? That's crazy. And so the mockingbird reminds me of the start of my noticing birds. It's very early in my bird journey. I'm still not a bird expert, but I definitely pay attention to them now and I acknowledge them. And so this reminds me of the Crepe Myrtle in particular, because every morning when I'm drinking coffee, I see the mockingbirds that have made the nest in the Crepe Myrtle. They really like small bushes that are close to the ground. It makes them feel safe. That's where they like to have their nest. And so I get to experience the joy of remembering my beginnings and remembering that there was a point in time just like 6 years ago that I wouldn't have been able to identify even the simplest of birds. And so there's a romanticism here, I think, within that journey, the concept of really just appreciating and starting to romanticize everyday life that I think the Crepe Myrtle does extremely well. It's a very common plant down here, but because it is so beautiful, it is romanticized and appreciated by so many. So this was Little Bird Tarot by Shanna D. All right, the next plant I'm going to show is an incredibly important one to me. It's one of my favorite natives to the state, and it's going to be the Turks Cap. So I was only able to pick like a tiny little flower because I value this plant so much. I don't want to over harvest from it. So I'll put on the screen right now a video of what it looks like. So one thing you'll notice from the video is that the Turks Cap has like these round circular leaves. And so of course that brought to mind for me the Archetypes deck, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. You know, at first, you know, my intuition was telling me, oh, pair these together because they look similar. But then as I got to thinking about it, it's not just the shape of this deck that really seems to make these two a pair, but it's also the potency of this deck. So the Turks Cap is one of the hummingbird's favorite flowers. Same with butterflies, because of how deep the butterflies and the hummingbirds can go to get to the very bottom of here. And here there's just this delicious little tasty nectar. You can taste it as a human. I have before, and it's super, super sweet and super glorious. But essentially the insects and the birds have to dig pretty deep in order to be able to get that nectar. And I think that describes the Archetypes deck very well. Similar to the Turks Cap with the Archetypes deck, you have to dig a little bit deeper. The information is not just on the surface, because we're dealing with big archetypal energies. You really have to find yourself digging into the middle, digging deep, and be willing to do the work to be able to get that succulent juice out of it. So that's why I'm going to pair these two decks together. I feel that they match not only in general shape with the leaves, with the colors, but also this sense that the nectar is buried deep, just like with archetypes, the nectar is buried deep inside of us. We all can speak the language of archetypes because it's all embedded inside of our brains from the moment of birth, but sometimes we're not aware of it. We have to do the work to peel back the layers. So this was my Wild Unknown Archetypes deck, which, by the way, guys, I almost gave away this deck like 10 times. I'm sure I've said that on my channel. And right now, I'm just so thankful that I did not. And it's just a reminder to me that decks have their time and their place and their purpose. And so I'm happy that I kept it, along with my Turks Cap. Okay, the next plant I'm going to talk about is going to be one that is doing extremely well in my yard, of course, because it's a mint, and I planted the mint in the ground, so it is taking over. And this is going to be my spotted B Balm. So you can tell probably from the video here that it's spotted right here in a way that kind of like looks like mildew. It's not the most attractive plant when it's out in the wild. I'll show you some footage of it now. However, one thing that I can say about it is that even though its aesthetic is not for everyone, the plant is a really excellent pollinator. So it offers a lot of food for thought for the animals that are visiting it. I've seen a lot of butterflies on here. I have a group of carpenter bees that just loves this. And so for that reason, I wanted to go ahead and pair it with my Dream Enchantress. I've been doing a lot of really beautiful work with this deck. I think that, like the spotted Bee Balm, the aesthetics are not for everyone, right? Like there's something a little bit different about this, a little bit odd from this. It's like, it's of course not in this world because it depicts, you can call them like alien creatures, you can call them dream creatures. It definitely is giving dreamscape in a way that I think the spotted Bee Balm does as well. You know, this is not a normal looking plant. It's very interesting with like its little leopard spots. But similarly to each other, I think that this deck offers a lot of potent advice and a lot of opportunity for growth. And so since the spotted Bee Balm is a mint, it grows tremendously, it grows abundantly, and I honestly feel like the way that my brain works when I'm working with this deck is so similar to the way that this mint grows in my garden. So every place where there's availability, it just seeps into it and it sits and it grows and it spreads, and it just gives me so much to think about, just like the mint gives the animals in my garden something to eat. So I think that they're similar in appearance. They're even similar like in color scale, but they're also similar in the way that they spread and they take up space, and they do so with their own very unique voice. So this was Dream Enchantress with my spotted Bee Balm. All right, next I'm going to share one of my favorite plants that I've grown this summer, and they are just taking over my garden so beautifully, shining tall, shining bright, and bringing me so much joy. And that's going to be my Mexican sunflower. So you'll have to excuse like the wiltedness of this. I picked this flower a few days ago and I didn't want to take any more from the plant. So I love this, I absolutely love this Mexican sunflower. It's not native to Louisiana, but the bees and the butterflies especially my Gulf fritillaries, love it. And so it's because of this flower, along with my Gulf fritillaries that eat from it a lot, that I think right now I'm shifting to where the color orange is my favorite color. And so it's having a massive impact on me personally right now. And so with that being said, ooh, we lost a petal. Let's see if we can get this to sit down straight. I actually bought a deck to help me work with the color orange, because I think that's the space that I'm in right now, is that I want to be loud and I want to be bright and I want to have my voice heard. And so I went ahead and bought, this is a brand new deck in my collection, and it's the Wild Radiance deck. It reminds me of the Mexican sunflowers because this deck is featured in a desert, and the Mexican sunflower does incredibly well in a desert. That's actually where it's from. It grows natively to like South Texas and North Mexico. And so it grows in some regions that are incredibly hot, incredibly dry, and that actually makes it work out really well for Louisiana summers. And so I think like regionally, these two decks work extremely well together. But this flower, in the way that it takes up space, I mean, literally, this is a small version of it, but you have some flowers that can just take up your entire hand. This flower takes up space in my life just like this deck is taking up space. It almost feels, when I sit outside in my garden, I'm looking at the Mexican sunflowers, that I'm transported to an entire world that has a lot of food for thought for me. Just like with this deck, I am transported to this desert. I am watching the movement of all of these individuals, the way that their bodies move. There's so much movement into the deck. And I too feel like a little gold fritillary that is nectaring off of a Mexican sunflower, flitting from one spot to another. I mean, look at that. Look at that movement. And so it's reminding me to be very present with my body, just like the little gold fritillaries are as they're jumping around. And so I would actually say that this is not just a deck and flower combo, but it's also a trio. I'm gonna have to throw the gold fritillaries in there too. But they're just so beautiful together. I mean, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. This is the exact mood that I am in my life right now. All right, and then last but not least, I'm going to share my sweet Partridge Pea, which is definitely wilting. I will have to show you a video of it. So I'll put that on the screen right now so you can see it in better condition. So the Partridge Peas just have these beautiful little flowers. They are gorgeous to press. They're actually one of my favorite flowers to press of all times because they're so delicate and they're so fragile. But this grows really close to my house and my house always has like tons of carpenter bees near it. Yes, I know it's like terrible, but like I can't bring myself to kill them. So I'm definitely having that moment of struggle between like doing what's best for Cheryl the house and doing what's best for the carpenter bees, but that's a side note. But my house also has a lot of beautiful little green anoles next to it. And so for that reason, I have to go ahead and say that this Partridge Pea absolutely 1000% reminds me of the lizards in the Funny Little Lizards Tarot. So I'm going to go ahead and say that, especially with the way that the Partridge Pea moves, which you saw in the video earlier, it reminds me of a tropical area. And so what better depiction of a tropical area than like iguanas and lizards and anoles and other reptiles. And so I feel like they inhabit the same space, they inhabit the same region. I also like that the Partridge Pea just has these beautiful bright colors, just like this deck does. So when you're driving up to my house from the road, all you see is just like this mass bush of just like green and yellow. And that reminds me of the way that the colors are depicted in this deck quite a bit. But essentially this deck makes me feel that I'm on a beach sunbathing, just like the Partridge Pea reminds me that I'm like on some like tropical island beach in the Caribbean, just maybe sitting back on the beach with a margarita, toes in the sand. And I know that like not all lizards of course live in that environment, but that's somehow where my mind goes, is that like lizards and iguanas like the beach. I like the beach. The Partridge Pea reminds me of a tropical beach. And so there we go. So this was the Funny Little Lizards. And guys, that's all I have for you today in terms of plants and also decks. So it's been a really long time since I've done this particular video, but I really do enjoy looking at my decks from this lens and looking at my plants from this lens. So if you're someone who thinks similarly to me or perhaps differently to me but is working a lot with plant energy right now, I would love to hear how you're embodying that and how you're bringing that into your practice. So I'll have to let you know the matches that I make. I think the one that I'm about to go and run off with is my Little Birds Tarot. I think I'm going to run off and read underneath the Crepe Myrtle tree what's in bloom right now with that one, but I'm sure that the other ones will get used in the weeks to come. So I hope that all of you have a beautiful day, and once again, thank you so much for supporting my channel. I really do enjoy being here, and I enjoy hearing from all of you. So thanks, and have a beautiful day.